Good morning. North Shore Unitarian Church is a community guided by love, grounded in reason, committed to spiritual growth, and striving for justice. We warmly welcome all of you today. My name is Gloria Schneider, and I'm very, very happy to be with you this morning. Our community strives to celebrate every person who comes to our sanctuary. Whether you ran in here on little feet, or walked in briskly, or ambled in, or rolled in, you are welcome. Whatever your complexion, or orientation, or gender expression, or political belief, you are welcome here. Unitarian Universalism is committed to the idea that every person has inherent worth and dignity, and we seek to share that vision with each other and with the world. In case it's helpful to you, please know that we have a loop hearing system available. You're also invited to take note of all the announcements in your order of service and plan to join us for any community events that are of interest to you. And to minimize disruptions, would you please turn any electronic devices you have to worship mode? Navigating this ongoing reality of the pandemic and the coronavirus is a complicated matter, and so we strive to make our worship as welcoming as possible, including for people who are medically vulnerable. We ask that all people who attend services and activities here wear a mask and be fully vaccinated, except when that is not medically possible. For those of you who are here for the first or second time, I would like to extend a special welcome. If you're comfortable, would you mind raising your hand so that we could welcome you? We're glad you're here, and we hope that you will remain and join us for coffee and conversation following the service. Also, if you are joining us online, welcome. You can learn more about us by visiting our website, nsuc.org, and signing up for our newsletter. May our time together in worship be a time of joy.
Just to let you know, the words for our introit this morning are, "Oh, I woke up this morning and my mind was stayed on freedom. I was walking and talking in my mind and my mind was stayed on freedom," etc., etc.
My spiritual companions, welcome to this day in this place. Now, I was informed that before I arrived and the choir was here, that the geese, which visit our church regularly, were very slowly, deliberately, and meditatively walking the labyrinth. So I guess they needed some peace and stillness, and I hope that everyone who arrives today finds that same peace and stillness. I'm going to invite us to do a responsive opening today. So it's number 540 in the gray hymnal. It's a celebration of autumn from Rabindranath Tagore. Here we go. All right, I'll read the plain text. I invite you to join me in reading the italics. Today, the peace of autumn pervades the world.
In the radiant noon, silent and motionless, the wide stillness rests like a tired bird.
Spreading over the deserted fields to all horizons, its wings of golden green.
Today, the thin thread of the river flows without song, leaving no mark on the sandy banks.
The many distant villages bask in the sun with eyes closed in idle and languid slumber.
In the stillness, I hear every blade of grass.
In every speck of dust, in every part of my own body, and the visible and invisible worlds.
In the planets, the sun, and the stars, the joyous dance of the atoms written in the sky.
Let's join together in the words that we say to light our flame. This flame affirms the light of truth, the warmth of community, and the fire of commitment.
We acknowledge the traditional custodians of this land, the Council of the Three Fires, comprised of the Ojibwe, Ottawa, and Potawatomi nations, as well as the Miami, Ho-Chunk, Menominee, Sauk, Fox, Kickapoo, and Illinois nations. We pay our respect to their elders, past, present, and emerging. We offer them our gratitude and respect, our repentance and hope in solidarity with them.
And let's stand and hum 2 verses of hymn number 170. We are a gentle, angry people, and we're singing for our lives. We are a justice-seeking people, and we are singing for our lives, etc.
My name is Jonathan Schlesinger, and I am the Congregational Life and Education Coordinator here at North Shore Unitarian Church. As some of you may know, we are very excited to be offering for the very first time our whole lives comprehensive sexuality education for those who are in kindergarten and first grade as soon as it's safe to do so indoors. In fact, at this very moment, 3 members of our congregation, Kristen Jones, Nancy Napolo, and Claudia Steinbrecher, are completing the final day of a 3-day instructor training in Oak Park. We are very excited to offer this program. For the youth in our church, but also as a service to young people and families in our community. Now, as a young parent, I'm excited that we're offering this program. I've been thinking a lot about topics like consent and body autonomy. I have 2 young children, and body autonomy and consent are things that my older child sometimes, we'll just say he's learning. He's a very physical young man. So this is something that I've been thinking a lot about. I've also been thinking a lot about how sometimes we as adults maybe expect a hug from a young person, maybe a relative. It feels great to have that hug. But maybe you remember as a young person, maybe not being in the mood to give someone a hug. Maybe you weren't keen on a cheek pinch or a noogie or a little peck on the cheek. So I decided I would write a poem about the topics of consent and body autonomy, partially for young people, to let them know that, hey, maybe it's okay to not always, want to feel that affection, but also for those of us adults. So this is a poem I wrote called Dear Aunt Millie. Dear Aunt Millie, Auntie, I did not ask for that big smooch. I am a person, not a doll or a pooch. I would really prefer a plain old high five instead of my face nuzzled in your big beehive. Oh, Aunt Millie, I love you, it's true, but no hugs, please. A simple fist bump will do. 0 cheek pinches would also be nice, beside fewer comments about my size. Your lipstick on my cheek gives me the creeps. I know your hugs have no malintent, but you never stop to ask for my consent. So, Aunt Millie, allow me to give your affection a little redirection. Before you peck or squeeze, please, a small task, just ask.
Beloved companions, I invite you to join me in that space of prayer and meditation with these words from Laura Horton Ludwig. Take a moment to breathe into the silence. Our breath is always with us, and we can always come back to the breath, our anchor, our grounding, our freedom. Spirit of life and love, we are here not just minds and hearts, but bodies too. We human beings, spirit and body joined together. On this day, we send out a prayer or a wish that every person, every being, may be safe and well in body and in spirit. May every person be well, and may we treat every person with respect and kindness and love. On this day, when we consider connections between our bodies and our spirits, we lift up our hope and aspiration that all people will live in freedom to give and guard their bodies as seems best to them, and to exercise their own powers of moral discernment around their fertility and creative potential. May we remember that it is especially challenging for those who are living in poverty to exercise these rights. And may our society support them in every way possible. We say a special prayer for all those who have experienced violence or abuse or any other form of damage to their being, which is so precious. May they know safety and healing. for all of us. May our physical being be a source of delight and of well-being as we live in this world. May every being be safe and well in body and spirit. May every person be well, and may we be vessels of compassion for everyone we meet. Amen.
The poem Fire is written by Nikita Gills, a 34-year-old Indian-British poet and author whose work, she says, has been inspired by Robert Frost, Sylvia Plath, and Maya Angelou. Nikita, who often appears on BBC, is successful, very successful, in a social media campaign where she connects with her vast audience, especially through Instagram. Fire by Nikita Gills. Remember what you must do when they undervalue you, when they think your softness is your weakness, when they treat your kindness like it is their advantage. You awaken every dragon, every wolf, every monster that sleeps inside you, and you remind them what hell looks like when it wears the skin of a gentle human.
So now I will offer another poem. It's by Henry Lefebvre, and it's a bit more whimsical, and it's tongue-in-cheek. It's quite comedic, much more so than the topic that we are about to explore today. But we're going to start here. When I was young, I lived it up and burned the candle at both ends. And now that past is left behind, and I have changed those awful trends. I have begun anew, it seems, and I will start to hoard my time, for now I think that I'll admit that I'm finally past my prime. Therefore, I'll sleep from 9 to 9, then take a walk once I have eaten. I'll take it easy from then on. If I don't race, I can't be beaten. But just to keep my mind in shape, my muse and I have made a pact. I'll write at least one poem a week as part of my declared contract. This poem is called Life Begins at 80. And here the poet unspools a question that is a favorite pastime, the pastime of pondering when our lives truly begin. I remember reading in my high school psychology textbook that most people said 25 was their ideal age. So for some years, through high school and beyond, I held that number in my head. I thought that when I turned 25, life would finally begin. It turned out to be the wrong sentiment. There was nothing magical about that age. Now, others will mark major life milestones as the age at which life begins. Perhaps it's when you graduate college and land your first real job, or when you marry your partner, or when you have your first child. But aside from the romance that we attribute to those moments, those markers often end up arbitrary. Often the certainty and confidence that we expect to arrive simply doesn't come. Maybe that is why the author of the poem settles on age 80 as when life begins. Of course, it's a speculative endeavor to try to pinpoint when we feel our adult lives begin. There is a fluidity in that, a subjectiveness that is built into that. It means something along the lines of when we feel most alive, which is obviously going to be an individual experience. Now, many would say this is very different from the biological beginnings of human life. We know when human life begins. Certainly, this is true in religious traditions. The ancient writers of the Hebrew Scriptures and the New Testament lay it out for us. And then most philosophers will support this conclusion as well. They will say that while we might argue over the meaning of life, we cannot argue over when human life begins. And then the medical profession has developed technology that supports these conclusions that humanity has known for centuries. After all, we now possess sophisticated tools that can analyze the most subtle of indicators, brain waves, heartbeats, cell clusters, even microscopes that observe fertilization. We know the exact moment when human life starts. I hope some of you were sharpening your arguments for the receiving line. Because everything I just said in that last paragraph, everything that I said about there being common agreement about when human life begins is false. It's just false. There is no unanimity in Scripture, in philosophy, or in science on that question. And while it sometimes is presented as a foregone conclusion, it is anything but that. Indeed, I would argue that it is as malleable a question of what age we feel most alive as adults. It's that malleable. Because so much of the pro-life movement organizes itself around scriptural texts, I think it's important to start there. And we might well imagine that the Hebrew Scriptures and the New Testament argue that life begins at conception. Any attempt to end a pregnancy will be met with God's wrath. We might even expect an injunction such as, "Thou shalt not abort." After all, that is the line that we hear from some of the most ardently pro-life. But the Hebrew Bible is surprisingly silent on this question. Now, some have used this silence to argue that abortion was so offensive that the ancient Israelites refused to even mention it. But that neglects the many times the Israelites critiqued the practices of their neighbors, such as idol worship and temple prostitution. Further, there are long lists of unacceptable behaviors in Leviticus, including against things like murder and incest. One would expect abortion to show up somewhere in those lists if it was a forbidden practice. The ancient Hebrews did not prescribe against abortion because they did not believe that life began at conception. Instead, life begins quite late for them. You see, the ancient Hebrew people closely associated life with breath. Indeed, they have a word that means both spirit and breath. It is nephesh. A nephesh is what the theologian E. Jacobs calls a person's total nature, and its etymological root is breath. We see this concept in the book of Genesis. These are the famous lines that dictate the creation of Adam. Then Yahweh, God, formed the earth creature of dust from the earth and breathed into its nostrils the breath of life. And the earth creature became a living nephesh. In other words, Adam came alive when he breathed his first breath. And then Ezekiel, in his vision of the dry bones, calls for breath to come, and we are told that breath came into the bones and they lived. Note again how breath equals life. Now, some will use the passage from Jeremiah to prove that life begins earlier than this. His famous line is often lifted up by the pro-life movement. "Before I formed you in the womb, I knew you." But this passage is not communicating the origin of life. Indeed, it is talking about God knowing Jeremiah before his mother was pregnant. Some might then say, okay, but because God created that embryo, abortion should not be permitted. But this runs aground on other problems. Presumably, God also knows and creates plants and animals too. Should we refrain from killing plants because God created them? To ground a pro-life argument in Hebrew scripture, we need a stronger passage, and we do not have one. Now, if human life begins with the first breath a newborn takes for the early Hebrews, can we expect something different for ancient Christians? Might one of Jesus's Beatitudes or Paul's letters condemn abortion? This is what the Jesuit scholar John Connery writes. "The silence of the New Testament regarding abortion surpasses even that of the Old Testament." In other words, the Christian texts are muted on these questions. Indeed, when you turn to Christian scripture for advice about family and sexuality, you often leave empty-handed. And the reason for this is simple. The early Christians viewed the end of the world as imminent. They thought the second coming would be any day. And so Paul advised people not to marry or have sex or to start families. Now, Roy Bowen Ward, a Harvard-educated scholar of the New Testament that I studied with for many years, wrote prolifically about sexuality in the Bible. And in one of his pieces, he talks about how abortifacients were widely available in the ancient world. For example, we have medical manuals from the Roman Empire that talked about which herbs and procedures were safest. What is interesting then is the fact that New Testament Christianity stays silent about these practices. And when you combine that silence with the fact that the New Testament is so patently anti-family, one starts to wonder if abortion was practiced by early Christians. It would certainly make sense. And indeed, this is a conclusion that my professor, Roy Ward, and other scholars reach. Now, maybe we choose not to go that far, and that's fine. But at the very least, we must admit that there is no evidence for moral prescription against abortion in the Bible. None. And we, of course, live in the modern age. And we have tools that the ancient Israelites and the ancient Christians did not have. And so some argue that we need to turn away from the church on these questions. We need instead to rely on science to determine the start of life. As I mentioned, technology can, with increasing accuracy, pinpoint fetal milestones. From fertilization to heartbeat to brain development, it can show us how a fetus is progressing. This technological accuracy, some argue, will resolve the thorny questions that religion can only make guesses about. But I would submit that that is a flawed argument. There is no physical milestone that proves someone's humanity because humanity is not a physical quality. Let's say, by some miraculous measure, that I continue living without the presence of brain waves or a heartbeat. Now, some mornings I feel like I am living without brain waves, and it's usually because I haven't had enough coffee. But anyway, I'm living without brain waves or a heartbeat. However, I still possess conscious thought. I can communicate reasonable arguments. I can show empathy. And I have a clear sense of self. For many people, this would provide me with enough qualities to consider me human. But these things, consciousness, reason, empathy, self-awareness, are not data that can show up on a sonogram. Science is unable to measure them. It is therefore of limited use when we decide on questions of when human life begins. Here's why this is important. Here is why I am talking about this today. The state of Texas has decided that a detectable heartbeat is the indicator for humanity. It has effectively set up a system of vigilantism against any woman or trans man who seeks to end a pregnancy. This law has effectively ended abortion in many parts of Texas. It has caused patients to flood clinics north of the state. And this is dangerous, and it could lead to sickness, pain, and death for many people. And it is particularly cruel for poorer pregnant persons and for women of color who will be disproportionately affected by this law. Part of the motivation for revoking these freedoms is grounded in conceptions of when human life begins. It then presumes to dictate the kinds of health care and medical treatment that pregnant persons can seek. It is confident that the indication of a heartbeat is the definitive moment when life starts. Well, I am happy to enter into this argument. I am glad to provide a liberal religious response that stands as counterfactual to these moral claims, because I can offer all of the reasons that there is no consensus, either medically, philosophically, or scripturally, about when life starts. And that is something that I feel called to do as a Unitarian Universalist minister, and also as someone who knows and cares about women who have had to make complicated decisions about pregnancy. And I will also say this, that while we cannot with certainty close the question of when life begins, we can with certainty say when it ends. It ends when someone's dignity is stripped away. It ends when someone is told that their suffering counts for little, that they cannot make decisions about their health and their body, that ideas about their well-being should be decided by the state, that their bodily autonomy should be subjected to someone else's religious whims. We should know that a pregnant person is not just a heartbeat, not just brainwaves, not just some kind of incubator. They are a conscious, rational, self-aware actor whose autonomy and ability to make health decisions are under threat. And our legal tradition, founded as it is on assumptions of autonomy, agency, and freedom, is grounded in the view that those components are crucial for a meaningful life, that they should matter. They should matter. We seem to have arrived at a political moment that ignores those hard-won truths. The Supreme Court seems to be laying the groundwork for a post-Roe v. Wade world. And so we who care about choice and autonomy must not cease our yearning for dignity and freedom for all people. We must not cease our striving to affirm that the lives of women and pregnant persons matter. We must not cease showing the world, in the words of the poet, what hell looks like when it wears the skin of a gentle human.
We're going to sing for you a song about a different kind of struggle. Go down, Moses. Go down, Moses, way down in Egypt land. Tell old Pharaoh to let my people go. When Israel was in Egypt land, let my people go. Oppressed so hard they could not stand, let my people go. Thus spake the Lord, bold Moses said, let my people go. If not, I'll smite your firstborn dead. Let my people go. As I listened to Lucas's message for us this morning, I thought that there was a disconnect. As I read these words, there is a connection. He talked about the biblical truths. And then I see in our actual sheet music that there's an introductory song that we're not singing today. The bass soloist sings a recitative, just a bit of text. And he says this, men were ashamed of what was done. There was bitterness and horror. We're talking about the same thing, aren't we?
The Unitarian Universalist Flaming Chalice has been a beacon of hope, of healing, and of compassionate service in a weary and hurting world. We are now the keepers of its flame, and its light is fueled by each person's gift of time, talent, energy, and financial commitment. Note that with the Share the Plate program, half of all non-pledge donations we receive in the plates will be donated to social and environmental causes. And this month, your donations go to the Pride Youth Program of Youth Service in Glenview and Northbrook. You can read about that in the order of service. And also note that after the service today, Lizzie Appleby from that program will be here to offer a forum for us called Gender is a Universe. So stick around for that. I believe that's going to be in Bletzer. No, it's going to be here in the sanctuary. So please do plan to join for that. Please note that you can give in two ways, either by putting money in the blue box by the sanctuary door or by scanning the code on the order of service. And if you are joining us online, I invite you to go to our website to donate. We will also have coffee hour and an opportunity to share joys and sorrows on Zoom. You can find the link for that in the newsletter. We will be turning our live stream off shortly, and we thank you for being with us today. Let us now celebrate our community with gratitude and generosity.